22nd, at 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
President Green.
Here.
Councilman Lafferty.
Here.
Councilman Watts.
Here.
Councilman Kawasinski.
Present.
Councilwoman Rogancy. Here. Councilman Papandrea.
Here.
Councilwoman Moore is present. You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next item.
Next item is adoption of the consent agenda. So moved.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mr. Kabazinski?
Yes.
Mr. Rogancy?
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea?
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passed 7-0. Next item.
Next item is adoption of the agenda. So moved with discussion.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion, Ms. Moore?
Yes. Remove item 11A. This property is no longer going to be demolished, so there's no need for a public hearing. And add 13A, legal update. And I would remind everybody that because of the holiday, there will be no reconsideration period.
Any additional? Call the question, Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Ms. Rogancy?
Yes.
Mr. Kabazinski?
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea?
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passed 7-0. Next item.
Next item is 6A, calendar of pending matters. Motion to receive and file.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
6B, discussion in Ray resident and neighborhood concerns.
Mr. President,
Ms. Rogancy?
there was an email that I received regarding a pothole. We may have all received it, I'm unsure, at 8476 Linda Street. And I advised the gentleman that I would bring it up this evening during resident.
Thank you.
It's at the end of his driveway, apparently.
Yeah, those pictures look pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Any additional resident concerns?
Mr. President.
Mr. Kabazinski?
Still the ongoing speeding and not adhering to the yield and stop signs on adjoining side streets to Mound Road, especially on Curie Street between 10 Mile and Frajo. This is an ongoing situation, and even the other side streets are now being used as a drag strip or a speedway for individuals that want to avoid the construction on Mound Road. So that needs to be brought to the attention of the administration as well.
Thank you. Any additional?
Mr. President,
Mr. Watts?
I would just like to mention that this will be the third time or fourth time this has been brought up, but 9 Mile and Panama, there's still a campground being run on the corner, and the pile of junk is still there. It's been there since July 1st, so hopefully somebody can get this resolved so the residents can stop complaining.
We'd like the administration to do all that stuff. Any additional?
Mr. President.
Mr. Lafferty?
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the effort of Mr. Watts, Mr. Vice President Watts, helping to report an issue at the Owen Jack Center with 2 large trailers that were being stored in the parking lot. Been taking my daughter there for play practice for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and taking up at least 10 parking spaces for one of them. There's a large semi-trailer, and then a smaller one adjacent to it. And with his work reporting it and getting it tagged, those have been removed. So thank you to Mr. Watts.
Good job.
Any additional? I have one. There's a resident contacted me about, let me find the address, 32126 Wellston. The house there has had bags of grass and leaves and carpeting and other debris in front of their house for several weeks. The sanitation doesn't pick that up. It needs to go into the proper container. But while sanitation hasn't picked it up, the resident hasn't done anything to change it either. And the neighbors are complaining and would like some relief. So if property maintenance or whoever is in charge of that sanitation can instruct the resident at 32126 Wellston how to dispose of that properly, it may just maybe a communication issue that would be helpful. Any additional? All in favor to send this over to the administration for action?
Motion to approve.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item.
7A, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 25th, 2022. So moved.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
7B, approval of the minutes of the special meeting of November 10, 2022. So moved.
Support.
Motion by Moore, support by Watts. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
7C, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 15, 2022. So moved.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next item is 8A, approval of the bills of the general revenue fund. So moved.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Ms. Rogency?
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passed 7-0. Next item.
8B, approval of the bills of the water and sewer system. So moved.
Support Rogency.
Motion by Moore, support by Rogency. Discussion. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Rogency?
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty?
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passed 7-0. Next item.
Audience.
Members of the audience who would like to address council this evening may do so under this portion. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. When there's 1 minute left, I'll let you know. This first speaker is Lori Harris.
Good evening.
Evening.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Thanks for allowing me to have 3 minutes of your time tonight. I wanted to address a few things to the council. For anyone listening in during the live stream, hi Tony and Dorothy. The city is supposed to find a way to allow those who need special accommodations a way to participate in these meetings. The communications department should be able to find out how to do this. And it's a travesty that we don't treasure every citizen's right to participate. The city of Warren received about $26 million from the ARPA funds, which was money given during the pandemic, which we are still dealing with, by the way. In our state, in Michigan, every week we have at least 100 people dying from COVID. This past week we had 275 people die. Let that sink in. I believe that when council was on Zoom during the pandemic, there was some discussion about what that money could be spent on. Since some parts of this community are aware of exactly how much money is left out of the $26 million and feel entitled to spend more of this money, can we please have an update on exactly where the $17 million plus has already been spent or allocated? And can you please set a public hearing, including asking for input in the Warren Weekly and the water bill insert on the Facebook groups? I think that would be really helpful. I've mentioned before that we have human needs that are aching to be filled in our city. We have citizens buying their food from dollar stores. Where are our creative minds? I recall reading about a produce store that sent a van into the neighborhoods where there were immigrants who did not drive, and those households could get fresh produce that way. That's a program, something like that we could start in our city. Ron, you never did care about running for council on any type of agenda. I'm still not sure why you are here. To represent the council at a town hall only to spew hateful, negative, and false accusations against your fellow council members is despicable. Eddie, I'm confused about your inability to see clearly that you are being played by the mayor. I mean, maybe we all are. But as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will continue to expect all the council members to fight for the citizens of the city. And Ron and Eddie, I humbly ask you to consider resigning since you have no intention of supporting this body nor the city as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael Howard.
Words have power. Some would argue that words have the power of life and death. And whenever someone's in a position of leadership, the higher level of leadership position they have, the more weightier those words are. This council is the second highest chair as a body in our city. Your words have power. So when we make off-the-cuff comments about racism has nothing to do with this, or those that talk about it are ignorant, I just challenge you. Those words have power, and they have already had a real effect. To say that those that are ignorant, that are talking about how race is a factor in this, when you know nothing about racism or have never experienced a day in your life, you've never had to hold a child, and when your child says, I'm trying to scratch off my skin so I can be a different color, or console an Asian barista because she's crying because she's been verbally abused by people because she's from a different nationality, when you have no experience in that, to have the audacity to talk about those ignorant enough to think race is a factor, race is a factor every day of my 29 years. And time again, people come to this podium and they make demands. And the only ones that are criticized that are making demands happen to be the black and brown ones. I don't know if this city council is allergic to accountability, but it's time to stop playing the games. It was cute to call those that went to a town hall and say that they had no authority being there when you were also, several of you were also at another town hall. How is that not hypocrisy in itself? Words have power. Thank you.
Joel Vanderlinden.
Joel Vanderlinden, longtime Warren resident. I've had numerous phone calls, people are trying to understand what's going on with this cricket field and why certain people feel the way they feel. And I'm going to try to explain it in the best way that most people can understand. You have an idea. An idea is like a baby. You have to nurture it slowly. So the idea is a cricket field. The next step is you got to have the baby learn how to turn itself over. You have to learn to communicate with other people around you to make your idea grow, same as that child. Then that child has to learn how to crawl. The cricket field is starting to crawl with the idea of spreading around the city of Warren, which is a great idea. Then the baby has to learn to stand. Stand, grab balance. You know, it's going to fall down here and there, but it's got to learn to have its own balance, own understanding. The cricket field has to stand on its own. You got to have an education to the people of the city of Warren what cricket is, how it can affect them, how it can be influential for their children. Your next step as that infant is the walk. The child has to teach itself each step, same as many people who do not understand how this government works. You have to take small steps before you can run. Before we can run and have $1 million cricket field, we first have to introduce it, educate the public, bring it into our schools so the kids learn how the sport is played and played properly. Before you can run, you got to see how much of the community really wants to play this game and how much doesn't. You don't go from being born to running without learning all these other steps. You don't go from an idea of a cricket field to buying or making or spending $7 million on a Jimmy John style cricket field, international cricket field. If you don't go through all the proper steps, that's the mark of a failure. That's a waste of money. It'll never take off, and people will be slow to react or to respond or to enjoy it. Thank you for your time. Have a blessed day.
Joe Rutherford.
Thank you, Council President Green, and hello, members of City Council. I wanted to rush over here just to speak because I watched the last city council meeting a couple times. I wasn't able to attend, but you know, it's interesting to me in the sense that I'm going to find myself, you know, agreeing with Councilmember Papandreou and surprisingly even Councilmember Kabazinski. This cricket field shouldn't have become such a big deal. Councilmember, you know, Lafferty had said, don't make it political. But everything that goes on here is political. You know, it was really upsetting to me to hear him say basically, and I'm not gonna be able to say this exactly, but that it was ignorant people that was just saying that there was racism or prejudice behind, you know, trying to squash this, or at least to put it on the back burner. If a year ago, the council had said that, okay, the cricket field was gonna be a priority, then it should be a priority. You know, and I'm glad Councilmember Papandreou spoke up and just said, look, you know, just make an amendment to the resolution to say this would be a priority. He didn't say how much money had to be spent on it. He didn't say anything about that. And it was something that the council could have done. But yet so much money is spent by the administration, by the council on other things, but yet just to do this, when you say people are not treated as second-class citizens, here's what I say. There's no people of color on this city council. So when you make statements like that, basically what you're saying is you're going to tell people that what they feel is incorrect. And that's something, to me, you don't have the right to do. And I'm not saying you're bad people. I'm not trying to say you're prejudiced. I'm not trying to say you're racist. But that's crossing a line. That's basically saying that how people feel, whether it be in the black community, the Bengali community, or any other community of color, when they feel that way, that's not justified.
1 minute.
But how can you possibly say that, but then take actions when it was obvious with the cricket field, you tabled it? All you had to do was just say, you know, we're going to make this a priority. Nobody said how much money had to be spent on it. The idea was to show the community that you cared. And that's, to me, one thing that just didn't happen. Thank you.
Next item.
Sorry. Next item is 13A, legal update from
How about
Mr.
10?
Announcements.
Oh, sorry, announcements, 10.
Any announcements?
Mr. President,
Mr. Watts?
actually got a couple things, but I don't know if the one would be proper or not. I have a statement that Mr. Baker sent me that he wanted read. This be appropriate or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, you know, he sent it for under audience because he couldn't make it, but it's pretty simple. What he writes is, when parks are renovated, I feel ADA compliance is a top priority. The local government's parks and recreation facilities play an important part in the life of a community and its members. Unfortunately, many parks and recreation facilities were built without accessibility in mind. Because of this, individuals with disabilities and their families often cannot participate in programs, activities offered at such places as public parks, baseball and football fields, town pools, county recreation centers, etc. Under federal regulations, when parks and recreation facilities are upgraded or altered, they must comply with ADA standards for accessible design, which require inclusion of features such as accessible parking spaces, routes, toilet facilities, public phones, and spectator seating areas. For parks and facilities that were built or altered before ADA standards took place, local governments usually must devise ways to make the programs and activities in those parks and facilities accessible to people with disabilities. If a local government decides to modify facilities to provide access to a recreation program or activity and has more than one facility available, such as when several ball fields are provided, only some of the facilities may be accessible. And he ends with, don't shut out our children with disabilities from enjoying their childhood. I would agree with that, but I wanted to get that on the record. The only other thing that I have is I wanted to wish all the residents and, you know, city employees, what have you, a wonderful Thanksgiving. Enjoy the long weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Any additional?
Mr. President,
Ms. Moore?
just as a reminder, there is a review of the 2021-2022 City of Warren Community Development Program performance That will be held on December 7th at 10 a.m. at the Warren City Hall, if anybody would like to attend that.
Mr. Kaczynski.
I got a question first, if I can ask.
Go ahead.
Just real quick. Is there a difference between it being, our council meeting being viewed on cable versus live stream?
I don't know, I've only seen it on this side of the,
No, I'm just wondering, is live streaming different from the cable?
Yes.
It is, okay. In that case, I'd like to make my announcement then.
go ahead.
Okay, so for those that are on the live streaming that don't get cable, you won't see the announcements that we made at the communications department. So in that case, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year for those that are on the live stream that don't have cable. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. Any additional? I got one. So for everyone in town and everyone wants to come, December 3rd at 5:30, or beginning at 5:30, so arrive before that, is the city's annual tree lightings. There will be activities, a Santa band, Warren Civic Theater, a parade, police and fire department vehicles, Cousino High School marching band, Mr. and Mrs. Claus, photos with Santa, ornament giveaway, hot chocolate, food truck, and wagon rides. Now, I have heard, too, that the mayor has promised that the ice rink will be open. I know there's been a lot of work on it, and they've spent some money, but he's guaranteed that the ice rink will be open for everyone to skate. I know a lot of families enjoy that. It really draws them out. So look forward to that. I know most of us, if not all of us, will be there. It's a great time, so please do come out. It's a lot of fun. And didn't someone's daughter we know pull the switch last year?
That was mine.
That was your daughter. She did a great job. I hope we can find a young child who can flip that switch this year and light the tree for Santa.
Mr. President.
Any additional?
Mr. President,
Ms. Rogancy.
just a friendly reminder about trash pickup with the holiday. There'll obviously not be pickup on Thursday, which is Thanksgiving, and that trash pickup resumes Friday and Saturday and will be one day behind schedule.
Thank you. Mr. Lafferty.
You mentioned the Warren Civic Theater being at the tree lighting. They're going to be promoting Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which will be performed here the weekend of December 9th, 10th, and 11th. And tickets are available online, and you can purchase those through warrencivic.org. So those tickets do sell out quickly, so get your spaces. If you have young children that would like to see that, definitely recommend you buy your tickets early. There is a matinee on Saturday at 3 p.m. for the little ones, and Sunday at 3, and the other two shows on Friday night and Saturday evening are at 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lafferty. Any additional? Next item.
Next item is 13A, legal update from Mr. Schroeder.
Mr. Schroeder.
Motion to approve, I guess.
Motion by Moore.
Support Lafferty.
Support by Lafferty. Mr. Schroeder, can you give us an update, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Glad you're still with us today. I have an update based on the court action that took place yesterday. I did speak to the temporary restraining order last week, which restrained the mayor and the administration from attempting to replace Council President Green. Since that time now, I know there were 3 council members in attendance yesterday at the court hearing. There was a motion to intervene in the case by the city attorney, Ethan Vinson, and by Mr. Gary Boyke, who was the 3rd place finisher in the 2019 at-large election. They are both being represented by a city-paid law firm, Miller Canfield, and we discussed whether or not Mr. Vinson would be admitted as a defendant to the case, and whether Mr. Boyke would. The court took that matter under advisement. We raised a number of concerns about that. Number one, why the city attorney wants to be a defendant in the case against the city council, and why the city attorney isn't entering the case as a attorney representing a party in the case. And with respect to Mr. Boyke, we looked at the state law, which stated that if you want to challenge somebody's status as an elected official and that you are the one entitled to that seat, there's a process called quo warranto, whereby you are supposed to write a letter to the Attorney General of the state of Michigan and say there is somebody squatting in the seat I was elected to, and the Attorney General either takes the case or declines to take the case, and after the Attorney General declines, a private party may take this to the circuit court and ask the circuit court for permission to file a case to remove the person they believe is squatting in their elected seat. And that process was not followed in this particular case. There was no letter to the Attorney General. In fact, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Michigan Attorney General on October 26th, which was the date that the council office received notice that Mr. Vinson was declaring that Mr. Green's term was up. And we received a response several days later that there was no quo warranto filed with the Attorney General's office against Mr. Boyke. Some unknown or unnamed individual had done so against the mayor last year, saying that he was past 12 years and should be removed, and apparently the Attorney General's taken no action on that. So the point of this was, why is a city law firm representing Mr. Boyke when the statute clearly says a private party has to first go to the Attorney General to ask for the Attorney General to look into it and then go to the circuit court? So the court, because there were so many filings in the last week and so many legal briefs and so much reading to do for the judge, she took that under advisement. We then moved on to the request for an injunction. What we had last week was called a TRO, a temporary restraining order. A temporary restraining order, by its very name, is a temporary order that would restrain officials from doing things they otherwise would do. In this particular case, the mayor and administration were restrained from moving Mr. Green out of his seat or taking away any privileges of office, voting, salary benefits, email access, all those things that come with being a council member. And so that temporary restraining order was converted into what's called a preliminary injunction. It's a preliminary injunction without an end date at this particular point in time. And the injunction essentially says the same thing as the temporary restraining order, that the administration, the mayor, and anyone else working with them is restrained from trying to remove Mr. Green from his seat and replace him. And so the next step in the process, and to get a preliminary injunction, you need to show 4 things. The first one is likelihood of success on the merits. The court listened to the arguments about the city charter, the language in the charter about Mr. Green's past prior term. It was thoroughly analyzed and thoroughly argued, and the court came down on the side of the greater of 3 complete terms or 12 years would allow you to have served a partial term previously. There were other factors, including the public interest, including irreparable harm, and the court went through very methodically, went through all the factors and said that the council had met the 4 factors for a preliminary injunction and ordered that. So the mayor wants to be dismissed from the case. His attorneys filed a motion to have him dismissed from the case. That is going to be heard December 12th. Again, it's just a motion hearing on that particular day. We don't necessarily expect any decision on whether the mayor will be dismissed from the case at that time. So this is an ongoing matter, although there's a preliminary injunction in place, and I can certainly answer any appropriate questions if there are any. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Schroeder?
Mr. President,
Mr. Watts?
the question I have is, the clerk swore in a person, in my opinion, I'll use the word illegally. What kind of liability are we going to have for the mayor and her doing that? Are we stuck with are we stuck with an employee now, or is this going to be, any thoughts on that?
I should add that when we first filed this lawsuit last week, it was before they swore in this individual, the clerk did. We did amend our complaint on Friday to add a request that the court set aside the swearing in. So the issue is, it's administering the oath of office. So you're coming in and you're taking an oath. I'm not sure that means anything if there's no vacancy on the council. That oath is not a promise of any position to the person who was sworn in. It was simply administering the oath of office. I don't know that it comes with any rights or privileges, but we are asking the court to set it aside. I would agree with the characterization that it was unlawful in the sense that it does not confer the office of city council upon that individual just by the act of swearing them in. As I stated last week, council members are chosen by the voters. Vacancies are determined by the charter, and that interpretation of the charter has taken place, at least preliminarily, by the court, and there is no vacancy.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to say, hats off, great job. Too bad we don't have a city attorney that does what he's supposed to do.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lafferty.
just a follow-up to Mr. Watts' question to Mr. Schroeder. I'm curious if it's been discussed or will be discussed in court under what authority the clerk determined that she was to swear someone in. Because if you're thinking about this the way I am, everybody show up to City Hall. Anybody that wants to be up here, show up to City Hall tomorrow and ask to be sworn in as a council member. So I'd like to understand what paperwork, what authority she was given, by whom, because it's obvious that she was taking direction from someone other than us. So if a letter was not sent by council office to the clerk's office, by what means did she determine that there was a vacancy on council? I want that question answered.
Councilman, in court yesterday, it was divulged, I think more than once, by the attorney representing Mr. Vinson, that the clerk was acting under the authority or the advice of the city attorney. So that was discussed in court yesterday by the opposing counsel, that both the mayor and the clerk were acting either at the direction or the advice of the city attorney. And I just, again, what I explained to the court was, and we've had this happen multiple times, the city attorney writes opinions. Just if I provide advice to counsel, as special legal counsel, if it's a memorandum, it's an opinion, but ultimately counsel has to make that decision. There have been times when I gave an opinion to counsel, and I think of at least one instance where the counsel did something else, and that's okay. Attorneys are advisors, and the city attorney doesn't have the power to create a vacancy. That was our argument. And what they're using is they're using a city attorney opinion as if it were an edict, as if it had the force of law, and that's not how it works. But apparently in this case, the city attorney rendered advice to the clerk or said you have this authority, and then the clerk acted. But the clerk is an independently elected official that does not work for the city attorney. The clerk, much like the council, the mayor, and the treasurer, are elected by the residents. So that's the explanation we have, and attorney opinions are not the force of law. If you always make your own decision. Any client makes their own decision after getting that advice, but there's a disturbing pattern of opinions being issued like edicts, and then suddenly we have these crises that land the city in court.
That's precisely your last part there, where the clerk is an independently elected official, is what's most troubling, is that she appears to be taking orders from someone other than her oath of office that statutorily gives her borders on what she can and cannot do. She doesn't have the authority to act outside of those borders. And to the point that I want that question answered, I also have to wonder if there were any laws broken during this entire debacle, and if the assignment of a special prosecutor from Macomb County would be warranted in this case. So that I'll let the court play out to determine making that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Lafferty.
you.
Ms. Moore? Oh, I thought you had something. Anybody else? I'd like to thank Mr. Schroeder for the work that they did in resolving this, and thank the court for the result. Mr. Kaczynski?
I have some related questions.
Sure, go ahead.
To Mr. Schroeder.
Please.
Mr. Schroeder, would it be a true statement that the past Attorney General of the state of Michigan, Frank Kelly, made many Attorney General opinions, and they had power and force of law?
An Attorney General opinion from the state of Michigan only has the force of law if it's a published opinion with an opinion number, and it's only enforceable on state officers and agencies. It would not be applicable to municipal officials.
Okay, but the state's attorney general would be the highest elected law enforcement officer in the state of Michigan, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the highest appointed law enforcement officer we have in the city of Warren would be the city attorney, appointed, not elected.
It's either the city attorney or the police commissioner. In terms of law enforcement, I wouldn't know that the city attorney is a law enforcement officer.
So we're supposed to use the city attorney to get legal opinions, and so your position is the city attorney's opinion would not have the power of law in the city of Warren?
It doesn't have the force of law, no.
That's your opinion, or is that a matter of fact?
Well, that's the state of the law. I mean, if that were the case, then things would be a lot different. This council wouldn't be passing budgets. This council wouldn't be, Mr. Green wouldn't be here if that were the case.
I just find it very troubling that there's a difference between the state's attorney general's opinion, which is at a state level, but it's different when it comes down to a city attorney's level at a municipality, where they don't have an opinion that has the power of law, but yet a state attorney general would have. And Mr. Frank Kelly, for many, many years, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican administration, his opinions had power of law and they were respected.
Again, if it was a published opinion, so you can go online to the Attorney General's office and search Attorney General opinions. And I know you're referring to a letter from 1998 that was discussed in court yesterday. It was a letter. It wasn't an official Attorney General opinion. But you can search all those opinions. They actually have opinion numbers and years attached to them. But if it's not related to the duties of a state officer, they don't have the force of law. So municipal officials, they're not binding, and that's because of the state constitution. So if you look at the state constitution, the Michigan Attorney General has power and authority. That's different than the power and authority given to the city attorney in the charter, for example. The state attorney general has a lot more power and authority with respect to her position at the state than the city attorney would here. And again, the city attorney general is elected, so you'd have to compare the state constitution to the city charter. But the thing I think you're referring to was a 1998 letter from Mr. George Ellworth, who was an assistant attorney general. Mr. Kelly did not sign that. Mr. Ellworth did, and he discussed about whether the council wanted to, moving forward, consider midterm vacancies. And if the council wanted to have a hard stop at 12 years, and there was never any follow-up. So if the council wanted to do that, it would have to put that on the ballot for a charter amendment, and that never occurred. Otherwise, as I stated in court yesterday, if it was 12 years and it was a hard stop, then the mayor would have to leave his position as well. And that certainly wasn't the intent of the council when it amended the charter in 2020, and certainly isn't the intent of the greater of 3 complete terms or 12 years. So yes, there is a letter that addressed that. It's not an official attorney general opinion. It wasn't signed by Frank Kelly. It was signed by Mr. Ellworth, and he raised a good question, but the council never followed up and created a midterm vacancy provision. So that's an excellent point.
I think, and I'll ask my question after I state my point of view on this here, Mr. President, is that I think we're conflating the intent and the will of the voter that was done under Birdie, under Connor Birdie's action, and we're conflating that with the charter amendment that was done with the mayor. They're two totally separate, different issues. I have already explained to the mayor, yes, the charter amendment that was done, you would be finishing your term, but it would not allow you to run for another term. So the pass that was done with the 20 years, okay, and that's not going to count anymore because there was a charter amendment done during your term, okay, and that would allow you to complete that last term, but it would not prevent you from completing that term. I think we're mixing the two. We're mixing the charter amendment that was done, or the legal action that was done by Connor Birdie, and the voters knew full well what the situation was going to be for all of the candidates that were running in that election. versus the mayor's situation, because the charter amendment hadn't taken place until this council was in office. That's when the charter amendment happened. It did not happen prior to our election. The situation with Birdie happened prior to our election to this council. So all the voters knew full well what 12 years meant by 12 years. In the case of the mayor should know that this is his last term, whether it's 12 years, whether it's 20 years. The charter amendment spoke, the people spoke. It was done in the middle of his term, and he'll be done here at the end of 2023. There will not be another term for the mayor. We have to be consistent, though. We have to be consistent. We have to say, you know what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. I'm not calling you a goose or a gander, President Green. I'm just making.
I'm just.
So my question is, why are we conflating the two? It was brought up in court yesterday that we're conflating the council terms with the charter amendment that was done with the mayor. And I heard that brought up several times. Why are we conflating the mayor's situation, which is totally different than what Councilman Green or President Green's situation is, which is a totally different situation? Birdie was done before the charter amendment. The charter amendment was not done before Birdie. So this one came first. We should be concentrating on what what Birdie's decision was, and not the charter amendment with the mayor.
They're not being conflated here. The issue with the Birdie case is the opinion and order of June 11th of 2019 of the Michigan Supreme Court that addressed the section 4.2 of the city charter, which deals with the city council's ability to determine the qualification and election of its members post-election. The issue in Birdie was that the Michigan Court of Appeals stated that we had 4 council members who were past their term limits, not Mr. Green, 4 other incumbent council members who were running for re-election that would exceed those term limits. And the Court of Appeals said, well, deal with that after the election, because the charter in section 4.2 says the city council determines the qualification and election of its members. The Supreme Court stepped in and said no, by a 7-0 vote, that prior to the election, that the clerk and the election commission have to determine the qualifications of candidates for office. In this context, they were candidates for office, for re-election. And as candidates, they have to meet the qualifications, and they clearly didn't. And so the election commission and clerk had a duty to remove them from the ballot. The court went out of its way to analyze section 4.2 about the post-election jurisdiction of the council to determine the election and qualification of its members, and stated that there's a long history of cases in the state of Michigan where legislative bodies, including municipal corporations like the city of Warren, where the legislative body deals with membership, eligibility, and qualification issues after the election. We saw this 5 or 6 years ago when the Michigan legislature removed a sitting legislator after she was involved in some sort of scandal and problem and illegal issues. In this particular case, they referred to the Houston case from 1966. So you read Birdie, it refers you to the Houston case, not Houston, Texas, but it actually was an incumbent council member, Houston, from the city of Sylvan Lake, Michigan. And Houston got elected, and his challenger in the election was challenging whether he lived in the city long enough to be a councilman. And they received a city attorney opinion. The council then called a special meeting, and the council decided not to take any action. And then his opponent brought a suit in circuit court, and the circuit court said, sorry, it's post-election, this is the council's duty. Went to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals said, sorry, your charter says after the election, after it was on the ballot and the voters elected that person, that the council is the decides the qualification and election of its members on an ongoing basis. That was referenced in the Birdie case. So the reason we're talking about Connor Birdie in his case is that the Supreme Court went out of its way just 3 years ago to review this and give the whole lineage and history of a legislative body's power to decide the qualifications and election of its members. So it's not really conflating, it's just referring to this to show the court and the public that this was just decided by the Supreme Court, and they analyzed this, and it was very relevant for this particular case, because the city council is the plaintiff in this case, and the city council met and passed a resolution on this and decided to take no action, much like the city council in the Sylvan Lake case.
Redirect? Okay.
Mr. President?
Could I ask one before, if I could, really quick, please? Mr. Schroeder, there's been many opinions from Mr. Vinson that have directed council or the administration to perform its duties in a certain way, resulting in us going to court because we disagree, and it doesn't hold the power of law under the state constitution. Have we prevailed in all those?
I want to knock on wood so far.
Well, yeah, knock on wood, but
Okay.
yeah. So,
Yes.
so our arguments have been accepted by the court. They've been rooted in law, and it continues to serve the city well that we make those arguments and that we follow the law. I understand what Mr. Watts said. I appreciate what Mr. Kabazinski said. Those are good questions so we can get it out to the public and how the differences in certain things are. And I asked Mr. Watts' question. I asked the same question of Mr. Schroeder the other day on how strong is the defense for an individual who just says, well, I'm just acting under the advice of counsel. You know, if it's criminal, that's one thing, but if it's performing the duties of an office, there's also an oath that you took, and there's ethics involved with, especially with that office, that need to be followed. And we've had this several times with the most recent circumstance with myself, with Andre Duje, and with others. So this is not something new. Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. My comments are going to be also about the city attorney. The city attorney is not elected, and the city attorney by charter reports directly to the city council, and that the city attorney has no power over this council whatsoever. Merely, you know, it's evident in the fact that the charter says that the city attorney reports directly to us. And that's what's so troubling, is that someone that asserts he is the city attorney, time and time again, continues to take action contrary to this city council, which is against his duties and ethical obligations as an attorney in Michigan. And you know, the Attorney General is a much different position than a city attorney. There's no comparison. So, thank you.
Any additional? Thank you. Motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Next item.
Next item is 14A, which is a reconsideration filed 11/17/22, which was a request of the 37th District Court for an increase in budgeted appropriations in the amount of $400,000 to cover the cost of architectural and design engineering services for the new 37th District Court building, consideration and adoption of a resolution. Mr. President, at the time that needed 5 votes. The reconsideration requires since that was a 7-0 vote, it requires a motion and support and a 7-0 vote to allow a reconsideration.
Mr. Kabazinski, your item, you have 5 minutes to make your argument on 14A before we take a vote on the ability to reconsider.
Okay, so I provided backup material for everybody. There are 2 pictures. This occurred on Thursday. So this council's only authority over any action by the 37th District Court is through the budget and our votes on the budget. And that's our only authority. So my reconsideration is of my authority to approve costs to the 37th District Court to continue their work. In this case here, there was a situation that happened on Thursday of last week concerning Miss Moore. This is not meaning Council Secretary Moore, a different Miss Moore, which happens to live on MacArthur at the address provided there. There was an illegal eviction done that was approved by one of the 37th District Court judges. The mother and the two small children, she is a single mother, were physically removed. This was not done by district court officers or by officers of the Warren Police Department or by the Sheriff's Department. I did my research to find that out, and this was done illegally by private individuals. What is going on here is there is a venture capitalist firm, which I have just recently found out is also a law firm as well, that acquired the purchase of the MacArthur Manor apartments, which are privately owned apartments by the individual, kind of like the same way that apartments are done in New York. They're purchased by the individual, and they have direct ownership and responsibility of that apartment. But they have a maintenance firm that handles for maintenance and like lawn care and that kind of thing. So what took place is Ms. Moore had put in an escrow rent that was due to MacArthur Manor Apartments. She followed the direction of the MSU extension, which is provided in the practical guide, the landlord and tenant. That advised her to put her rent into escrow, and when she completed the repairs, to start paying rent back or to the house payment towards the management company. The management company got acquired in mid to late October by this I think it's called Hungin firm, and they're a venture capitalist firm as well as a law firm. And I don't know what they're planning to do with the property, but she is the first of many evictions that are about to happen at that location. We've had to deal with venture capitalist firm in the city of Warren before with Art Van and Love's Furniture, and a similar situation that Ms. Rogancy brought up on the council agenda item last week with Landmark Real Estate, where a venture capitalist firm is coming in and wanting to remove those individuals and do something else with the property. So the judge in the 37th District Court went ahead and did this eviction with really not doing any research on the home life situation or what was going to be detrimental for this tenant and her two children, and also looking into the situation that happened here with this eviction. This was done in the early morning hours using a battering ram. You see it in the pictures there at that location, and she was, like I said, violently physically removed. She had to go to her doctor, her family doctor, to get her children checked out, as well as herself. All of her items were tossed out, which were brand new, brand new appliances. She had to do her own mold mitigation. Did that herself, had a contractor come in, redo the plumbing, and had a contractor to do the paint job. So she did this all herself, put that money into the escrow, and yet this still happens. And it seemed that the judge did not do his own investigation, his own detective work, and actually go out into the field and find out exactly what is going on. I did all this work here on a Thursday and a Friday here to put all this together to provide this. Now, if this was an actual legal eviction done by this new venture capitalist firm, taxes and all liabilities have to be paid for first before you have a change in ownership. All the taxes were not paid. They had outstanding about $51,000 in outstanding taxes. They only paid approximately $29,000. They still had about $22,000 still outstanding. And according to the water department, they had about a $20,000 water bill still outstanding for the entire complex. So those liabilities had not been paid. Those liabilities are not paid. You cannot have a quitclaim deed done, and you cannot have change of ownership. So when she was told to contact corporate, the new corporate, when these venture capitalist firms take ownership of a property, they get rid of the property management company and they take care of it. She tried to contact them and get this resolved, and they never responded. So I did confront the 37th District Court judge on Thursday, and I did explain to them what the result of their actions was, and the attitude of the judge when I went in there was in one ear, right out the other ear. Didn't seem to care, didn't seem to have a heart. So if my only position on the council here, my only authority over the court is to deny them the finances to go forward here with their item, that's what I wish to do on my vote. I understand I would not be, I would be in the minority and this would still pass with 6 votes, but I would like to change my vote irregardless as a sign that I try to represent and advocate for the constituents that I have in South Central Warren that are going to be victims of this venture capitalist firm. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kabazinski. Call the question. We need a motion and support for the reconsideration. Is there a motion? Item fails for no motion.
14B, which was a reconsideration filed 11/17/22, request of the 37th District Court for an increase in budgeted appropriations in the amount of $44,025 for sufficient funding for the balance of the 2023 fiscal year, consideration and adoption of a resolution.
Is there a motion? Item fails for lack of motion. Next item.
14C, consideration and adoption of a resolution to approve contract modification number 2 and final, and payment number 5 and final to City Contract JS 27749 2021 Advanced Joint Ceiling Program, increasing the contract amount with Cimarron Inc. by $51,391, resulting in a final contract amount of $811,091. So moved.
Support Lafferty with discussion.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion, Mr. Lafferty.
Through the chair to Ms. Gapshis. While you're coming up, just a question about the quality control on the joint ceiling. Do you have somebody going from the city to supervise the joint ceiling?
Yes, yes, we have an inspector
Okay.
that follows them. I mean, most of the time. There's sometimes that they're on other projects, but we follow them around as much as we can.
The only reason I bring it up is I had brought that concern to you in my neighborhood where they had come through and it looked like they had blew out the cracks and then didn't fill them in. So I just wanted to make sure that there was...
They didn't complete the job?
They did. They
did.
came back. They were done within, I think, the end of the day Wednesday after I had mentioned it to you.
Oh, okay.
So it was done, redone, I guess.
Okay.
And then the only other question I had, Ryan Road between 9 and 10 Mile, how are we progressing?
The northbound lanes will be done. I think they poured all the way up to 10 Mile today. And they're going to work on the approaches and then button up until spring and work on the southbound.
Okay, so southbound won't be until next year.
Yes.
Okay.
They had cement shortages. He would have been done, but the cement shortages stopped him.
Okay, no problem. I appreciate the update, and I couldn't let you go without having to. You spent all this time sitting here, so I had to ask the question. Thank you.
I'm here.
Any additional?
Mr. President,
Mr. Watts.
just want to hijack the item and just say thanks to Ms. Gapshis and her team. They had an awful lot of construction projects going this year, more than I can remember in many years. And, well, they almost pulled it off. I think they would have if it wasn't for the concrete shortage. But
Yeah.
I know the contractors that worked in my neighborhood did a phenomenal job on the streets. And so I just want to say
I gave them the compliment that you
I want to say
told
thank
me of.
you. You know,
Yeah, because they don't hear compliments too often, so
no, they
I always
did,
pass on a compliment when
they
I
did
get
a
them.
terrific job. So, and we thank your crew for, I know they spent a lot of hours out there and on these projects, but
Yes.
thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any additional? Call the question, Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty.
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea.
Yes.
Mr. Kabazinski.
Yes.
Ms. Rogency.
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passes 7-0. Next item.
13D, consideration and adoption of a resolution to approve contract modification number 1 and final to City Contract WWTP 20007, WWTP Fiber Network Improvement, ITBW 0259, decreasing the original contract amount by $128,040.71, resulting in a final contract amount of $1,160,222.29. So moved.
Support Lafferty.
Motion by Moore, support by Lafferty. Discussion. It's always good to see a decrease. Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Lafferty.
Yes.
Ms. Rogency.
Yes.
Mr. Papandrea.
Yes.
Mr. Kabazinski.
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Green votes yes. Item passes 7-0. Next item.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving,